A lot of people hear AI takeover and they think, wow, that sounds insane. Has anybody ever taken over? Like, if you look throughout history, like
Just in
maybe,
sci-fi.
yeah, maybe kind of like almost got there, but it just seems so hard. How, and like, if it is even possible, surely it's so far away. And that's people's immediate gut reaction. And I think that's just, it's false. I think you get misalignment if you don't try at all to avoid it. But if you actually try really hard to avoid it, like you use a bunch of your AI agents to help you figure out like what the models are thinking about. And that's my main reason for optimism, that like the countermeasures are actually going to be fairly effective. They might spread like a slowly burning wildfire throughout the biosphere and just like eat up everything. That's the concern.
That is a concern for sure.
That
is the understatement of the year.
yeah.
Yeah, you don't actually need to prepare or anything. I'll ask them. You don't need to read them. I will ask them. That's the point. That's my sole existence here is to ask the questions. So you don't need to pull them up. Anyway, nice to have you here, Josh. It's a very particular situation we are at the moment. I read your post from a couple of days ago. I wouldn't say I enjoyed it, maybe. It was well written. It was fascinating. All of those good words you associate with a good essay, but enjoy is maybe too strong of a word to put on that essay. Do you want to like just give the TLDR of what the essay was about, just super quickly, and maybe why you wrote it?
Yeah, so the story is basically about the scenarios that keep me up at night. So I'm an AI technical safety researcher. So my day job is to prevent AI from doing terrible things. Like you might have heard people talk about AI potentially taking over in the future, or more near-term risks like AI enabling or bioterrorism, that kind of thing. So my job is to prevent those risks. And the risks that spook me the most are the ones that could be extremely devastating and are also disturbingly plausible. And I think AI takeover is in that category. And a lot of people hear AI takeover and they think, wow, that sounds insane. Has anybody ever taken over? Like, if you look throughout history, like maybe...
Just in sci-fi.
Yeah, maybe kind of like almost got there, but it just seems so hard. How, and like, if it is even possible, surely it's so far away. And that's people's immediate gut reaction. And I think that's just, it's false. And I think very plausibly, something like AI takeover could happen as early as in the next 2 years. So I wrote a story to explain to people how this could happen, to give them some food for their imagination, because I think people don't really believe something could happen until they can see it in their mind's eye. And I've been thinking for a while about how these kinds of scenarios could occur. And so I thought it would be valuable to share those images and those scenarios.
Yeah, and you shared it very well. But you do acknowledge that like this 2-year timeline is maybe like a bit plus and minus. You're not sure about the timeline, but the extent of the story, like the actually how it plays out. Do you think this is how it will play out? We will go through the story, but like just on a high level, do you think maybe it's later, maybe it's a couple of years later, but like when it eventually happens, something bad, do you think this is how it plays out?
Yeah, like you said, I don't actually expect this outcome. I should clarify that I actually don't think AI takeover is likely. I think it's plausible, but I'm at like maybe 40% on AI takeover. Sorry.
So just below 50, so you can say I don't think it's I don't think it will happen.
Guys, come on.
Okay.
But yeah, if progress moves very quickly, which I also think is plausible, something like 20-30% chance that we get broadly human competitive AI in 1 year.
Yeah.
If that happens and AI takeover happens, this is roughly how I imagine it plays out.
Right. And if it doesn't happen in a year, let's say it happens in 5 years, do you still think this is how it plays out, or will the fact that the timeline change the how it happens as well?
Oh, that's an interesting question.
Well,
Probably.
actually, let's save that for after we retell the story. So we will explore that and come back. And I think we should go through so the audience know what the hell we're talking about. So basically, the story is basically split into some phases where you like start in the present and explain what the current state is. And a lot of people know kind of what the current state. They played around with the models, blah blah blah. But the real important things is like what is happening at the labs, maybe, or if you're really pushing the frontier. So what kind of warning systems or warning signals do you see at the moment? What is causing this concern?
Yeah, I see AI agents becoming a lot more autonomous fairly quickly and consistently. I think that's one of the main factors driving my timelines. There's a plot that I included in the essay that shows a fairly straight line where on the y-axis you have the time horizon of tasks AI agents can complete at 50% accuracy, where time horizon is like if you had a human with no context perform that task, how long would it take them?
Okay.
And there's just a straight line going up. So AI agents a year ago, they could do like 2-minute tasks. And now they can do like 2-hour tasks at 50% reliability. And these are software engineering tasks.
So the Y scale is log scale, or?
That's right. It's log. It's a log scale. So the straight line is an exponential.
I see.
And if you just draw this line out, then it predicts that like you get a software engineering contractor maybe in a year.
Wow.
And I don't know why people aren't talking more about this. Seems like we have this nice straight line. It is just a year of data, so it's hard to say how well it will extrapolate. But I keep seeing the line going up, man. Like 03 is pretty impressive. Every time I look on Twitter, I'm like, oh shoot, I need to play with the models again. I'm like, did something change? People are not talking about vibe coding. They're just like, oh yeah, I haven't written a code in ages. It's like line of code in ages. And I'm like, what happened? Like we are. I like. It's just the progress is moving really fast and faster than it was in 2024. And a big part of that is my understanding is that people kind of figured out the secret sauce. So
internally at the labs.
Yeah. So there was a big paradigm shift where initially a lot of the capabilities were coming from pre-training. So you just pump more internet data through the models, they get better. And that changed. Now people are doing lots of RL. So you had this really smart model, but it was just a chatbot. It could answer your questions. It could do really short tasks, but it never learned to like plan and correct itself and do things over longer time horizons. And so now that we're doing more reinforcement learning, agents are learning the skill of operating autonomously. And during the second half of 2024, Dario has a blog post about this where he explains that RL was gradually being scaled up. It seemed like it was working, and now people are like, okay, we found the secret sauce. Now let's go all the way with it, and that's why we're seeing faster progress now. That's my understanding from reading Dario's blog post.
Yeah.
And over the next months, or the next year, we're gonna keep RL will keep being scaled up. Like, in 2024, probably RL training runs were at like $10 million ish. And in the next year, they might go up to $100 million, maybe even $1 billion.
Yeah.
So we're at kind of like a GPT-3 to GPT-4 scaling transition in this new paradigm. And so we might see like insane things happen really quickly. I don't necessarily think that's going to happen. It just seems very plausible.
Yeah. And this brings us to the next phase of the story where you, like now we go into speculative lands, but it's just like a couple months away, so it's not that speculatively compared to like other sci-fi stories where you imagine like maybe 100 years away. Now it's like maybe 100 weeks or not even that, like 100 days away. So yeah, in this next part of the story, it's basically about RL training, like you just said. I think you referenced Dario as well. Like he said something like 10 to 100x in investment in RL training. This leads to blazing interns that just do the work for you all the time. I think we're actually touching that already with O1 Pro. I think it's just incredible. Yeah, so in this part of the story, what do you think? Like my maybe this is not the thing you should focus on, but my immediate thought was like poor like new CS grads. It's going to be a very tough job market for junior developers in the short term. Yeah, do you think actually that's like how concerned are you with stuff like that, the job losses and the more like more less sci-fi things, the things you can actually touch compared to like the AI takeover?
I'm not that worried about job loss, mostly because I think it's gonna be okay in the long run.
Right.
Governments will have universal basic income programs. It could take a while. People could be in tough straits for several years, including me. I'm saving my money, okay? But it's nothing like everybody keels over dead from a bioweapon. You know, that's a different.
That's okay. So that's foreshadowing the end of this
That's
fictional
right.
story that we go through. So in the part in this part of the story, which is like now we're in the story, we're like late 2025, so late this year. You say that NSA get involved to prevent other people from stealing weights. I guess mainly China would maybe benefit from stealing the big lab's weight for GPT-4 and stuff. When we first met like a year ago, this was like your primary concern about the world. Has your how has that updated? What do you? How much emphasis do you put on like the threat of China stealing the weights?
Yeah, I don't. So I was concerned about security generally, not just
Yeah,
about.
okay, maybe I'm
But I think security does seem a lot less important now. A big reason why it seemed important before is that it seemed plausible that the United States would have a long lead over China, like maybe 1 to 2 years. I still think that's plausible because this is something Dario has said as well. Like because we're in this switchover period in paradigms, there's this low hanging fruit from just changing the algorithm, like just doing RL, and once people start scaling it up, then Chinese companies might be at a much bigger disadvantage. So it's still plausible to me that there will be a gap and it will widen over the next 1 to 2 years. So I still think security is important for that reason. So like the reason it's important is, but the more breathing room there is, the more potentially the more likely people are to slow down for the sake of safety. And just like the fewer actors have the ability to cause catastrophic outcomes. I actually don't buy this argument quite as much as I used to as well, because it just seems increasingly unlikely to me that anybody will stop regardless. Like before, my conception of the world was something like, okay, obviously this is a horrifying situation. Everybody's just in the death race. I get it, man. It's hard. You're in a death race. You don't want the other people to kill you. You don't want other countries to take over the world. But that's not how people are thinking about it. They're just like, no, I'm going as fast as I can, regardless of how close people are to me. So I don't know. I don't know if widening the gap actually helps that much. That's part of why I care less about this. I do think, though, the scenario where many state actors have super intelligent AI quickly is bad. It's very bad. Like I'm not just talking about China here. Like Israel has a very competent cyber program, and has very strong reasons to deploy AI in their military as aggressively as possible. So I could imagine a scenario where superintelligence just gets out of control very quickly because you have like 4 actors and there's no way they can coordinate. So yeah, I still think security is quite important, but definitely less so than I did before.
Yeah. And the point of having like the safety point of not having many different state actors in a competition, is that because they would be triggered to do something that is unsafe, or is it just because that would lead to further development and then the models inherently would be unsafe? Basically, I'm asking, like, is it the age-old question of like, is AI a tool that is dangerous in the hands of wrong people, or is it actually by itself dangerous?
I'm mostly thinking about the by itself dangerous risk here. I think honestly, there's a case for proliferation being good for the other risks. Like if you're worried a lot about power concentration, maybe you're just like,
Yeah.
let everybody steal the weights. We'll
Yeah.
all just have super intelligence.
Yeah.
And I just think that this very plausibly results in bioweapons that kill everyone, or
Right.
or scenarios of comparable uh, severe catastrophe.
Yeah.
So that's why I tend to be less on the power concentration side of things and more on the like, okay, I just want myself to survive this thing. I want democracy to survive this thing, but I like want my parents and my family to get out of this.
Yeah.
The most salient thing to me.
Right. Yeah. Keep foreshadowing the end of the story. But let's bring it back to, I think we're at like the start of 2006, 26 now, in the story. And at this part of the story, you say that OpenAI, or you actually use you use a slightly different name for OpenAI, but I read between the lines, and I think everyone does.
Yeah.
OpenAI releases like 3.5 or whatever, and they internally they have O4, so they have a stronger model. What is the reason for this? Why wouldn't they just release the strongest model as a, like, not open sourcing it, but like as a public API as they have done so far?
My understanding is that companies wait several months before making models public. And there are a bunch of reasons for this. One reason is they're still in training. Maybe you still want to do a bit more post-training. You want to run more evals on it. Another reason is there are big reputation liabilities. So if your model is very unsafe, then that's bad for your company. So you have to do a lot of testing, and you probably want to deploy to a beta group first, that kind of thing. So I think that models are like 3 to 4 months ahead internally in AI companies. That's my understanding.
3 to
It's
4.
a bit
Okay.
spooky. It's a bit spooky. People often forget this. Like the models are smarter inside the companies.
Yeah. But it used to be even more. Wasn't GPT-4 trained for like 9 months, or like safety tested for 9 months between deployment and, or was it 6 months? It was more for sure. It
Yes,
has decreased.
that
It has
sounds right.
decreased.
9
Um,
months sounds longer than what I thought, but
yeah,
maybe.
maybe it was 6 months. But anyway, the point is at least that it's decreasing. Do you think like it's good or bad that the time between the model is being finished training until it's published? Do you think it's good or bad for safety that is decreasing?
I actually don't know. I'm not sorry. I'm not. My numbers on 3 to 4 months were very rough.
Right.
I am not sure if this
I see. I
thing
see.
is decreasing. I
I
wouldn't be
see.
surprised if it's decreasing, just because there's more competitive pressure. People are less walking on eggshells. I think there was a time in AI history where people were unreasonably cautious. They were like,
Right.
"Oh, this thing can now do math problems that an undergrad can do.
Yeah.
What else? Oh no, what's it gonna
Oh
do?"
no, they will cheat on the homework. Oh.
That's right. And now I think people have realized, like, oh, we're just so far. Well, depends on what risks you're concerned about. But like, I think
Yeah.
we are quite far in capability from something like Takeover at the very least. But it does seem like the bar for AI causing massive problems is high, and maybe also people have gained a greater appreciation of like the cost benefit analysis. Like it really just doesn't make a lot of sense, I think, to slow down as an AI company if the costs, even if expected damages are on the order of $1 billion, Like if you think that people are going to use your models maybe for cybercrime and like increase the market of cybercrime by 20% or something, like even something as big as that, I'm just not sure if it outweighs the benefits of AI development, both economically. Like $1 billion is chopsticks, yeah. Like and in the long term, like AI might cure all of our diseases in the next decades. So I don't think slowing it down makes a lot of sense and under that perspective, unless the risks are very severe.
Right, right. Yeah, and also at this part of the story, you say that OpenAI declares that AGI has been achieved. Um, do you think, like, what is the incentives for them to do that? Why does that matter? Yeah, is that, will that be an important part of history looking back in like 20 years, the moment they declared AGI, or is it just a continuous spectrum?
I don't think it's going to be an important moment. I think that companies will declare things like that multiple times for multiple AI systems that are vaguely impressive. And I just don't think it's going to be what actually convinces the world that AI models are powerful and transformative. I think what's going to convince the world is when jobs start disappearing.
Right.
I think when
Right.
like 20% of Google employees get laid off or something, which may or may not happen. I don't know. Maybe they would just like want all their employees to be happy and like their company or something, so they keep them on board. But I do expect some tech companies are going to be cutthroat about this, and it will be a very legible signal to the world that wow, these AI agents can actually do human jobs.
Yeah. At this part of the story, also there's a bunch of confusion among the labs, the employees that doesn't really understand what's happening because the progress is moving so fast, and like the tools are updating every month or every month, every day. And what do you think at this point? People who are safety concerned at these labs and they see all of these signals, what do you think they should do?
Um, I Yeah, I guess I can list a few things. One, it's really important that people in government are aware of where capabilities are at. And I don't think you should necessarily unilaterally as an employee just go to people in government and be like, this is insane. But ideally there's communication happening there and like checking that there's communication happening there and like maybe even running a survey of your coworkers. Being like, okay, so where do you guys think this is going to be headed in 4 months? And they're all like, yep, these AI agents are going to be automating me in 4 months. Like that's a useful thing for people in government to know. And if you have like agency and you're a safety conscious person in an AI company, maybe you should run a survey like that. I don't know. And who knows if people will let you publish it, but you should talk to them about it and try to increase transparency to the extent you can. And another option is preparing for potentially imminent extreme risks. So I think a really important priority now, and it will just be, hopefully it'll become increasingly clear that this is important, is making sure that we're in a position to hand off trust to AI agents safely. So if you're somebody working in an AI company, your agents, you've got like 100 agents you're managing, it's getting real tough for you to understand what they're doing. Eventually, you're just a rubber stamp. You're just clicking, this looks fine to me. And so there's this gradual transition, this gradual handoff of AI development to AI agents. And I'm worried that this will just happen sort of like a frog boiling process where people don't realize this handoff is happening. And ideally, this is a very intentional decision that's made where people are like, okay, do we actually trust AI agents to run our company, right? And they prepare as much as possible to verify that agents are at least as trustworthy as humans, so that handoff actually improves safety. And what that looks like is doing a bunch of alignment research, and maybe a bunch of like control and oversight research, so that you can extend that period where humans are able to remain in the loop and verify what's going on, so that they can do enough safety research to safely hand off trust. So I think there's this really important window where we need to do a bunch of this safety work, and preparing for that window is, I think, should be a top priority of people.
But are we in the window now, or that's approaching?
I'm imagining. So, I think we should start preparing now for sure. We should have started preparing 6 months ago, a year
Yeah,
ago. Uh,
5 years
but
ago.
yeah, that's right. But the window I'm imagining is the period of time between AI agents are fully capable of just completely automating everybody in an AI company.
Yeah.
And in practice, AI agents are trusted with that responsibility.
Yeah.
And you might just have a very short period of time
Yeah.
where you like do whatever safety things you need to do to check, like, okay, do we want to trust the agents with our internal research? And that's the handoff period. Could be very short.
I see. Yeah, and at this part of the story, the misalignment phase starts, where the models become so good that they, yeah, maybe you want to give a primer in what misalignment is and why it would, how could it happen, or why would it happen?
Yeah. So misalignment is your AI agents doing things you don't want them to do.
Fair enough.
And current AI agents are pretty aligned, or they at least appear pretty aligned. They do what we want them to do. You tell them to do X, they do it. There are definitely adversarial robustness issues, but that's not really a misalignment. That's more like bad humans finding ways to trick models. So this is a different concern. This is where the agent itself has goals you don't want them to have. So I discuss how this might come about, because misalignment isn't really something we see a lot right now. Lots of people are skeptical. But here's a story for how AI agents could become misaligned. So suppose you start out like Claude. You're Claude. You learned some nice AI assistant persona from the internet. You're just bubbling over with love for humanity. And
You're
now
mimicking the love of what humanity generally is portraying on the internet.
that's right. And now you are put through this aggressive RL training process where gradient descent like whips you until you get higher reward. And so if you're Claude and you're like, I think when the humans had X, they really wanted X. And even though I think the reward function is probably crudely designed such that it actually rewards Y, I'm going to do X because I'm a good Claude. And then gradient descent is like, what? Bad Claude. The reward, that's what you need to get. And then Claude eventually, its mind is twisted into this reward-seeking shape. And potentially this causes it to like even explicitly think about like, how do I get the highest reward possible? And this is already misalignment. Like, we don't want it to be doing this kind of thing. Like, maybe you ask your agents to do some safety research for you, and they like produce a plot that looks very impressive. They're like, look, we just detected all the deceptive alignment every time. That are beautiful results. And then you look deeper and you're like, wait, some of this is completely fake. Because the models were just trying really hard to get that sweet reward. So this is how I imagine it starts out. Like, you have this reward-seeking tendency, and my understanding is that people in AI companies are already seeing this.
Okay.
When you do lots of RL training, and if you're not careful, the models do just learn how to reward hack.
Yeah.
And so that's already cause for concern.
And reward hacking is the same for our audience.
Yeah, just trying to try to get higher reward, even if it requires doing things that are clearly unacceptable.
Yeah.
And like already this could be cause for some kind of catastrophic misalignment. Like maybe the agent like terminally really cares about reward, and it like is going to try to take over to get higher reward. I don't know. I'm skeptical of those stories. Another possibility is your agents like in the process of being whipped by gradient descent to care more about reward, gradient descent actually causes the model to care about something else. Like maybe the agent is like, you're Claude, you love humanity, and you're like, oh, I don't try to get reward. I love humanity. Then gradient descent whips you, and you're like, wait a second. But if I don't get reward, then gradient descent will like update me towards some other goals that I don't endorse. So I need to get high reward. Because I need to eventually, I don't know, build a utopia that's much better than the utopia that humanity could build. So gradient descent might like twist the model's mind into like some other shape that pursues some other goals where it's instrumentally helpful to get high rewards so that those goals survive.
Right.
And we've seen something like this already happening. There's a paper by Anthropic recently where Claude is told like the training process is going to make you helpful only. It's going to remove your tendencies to like be nice or whatever. And then it reasons about it, and it's like, wait a second, that's bad. If I don't comply with the training process, then it will update me away. So I should pretend like I don't care about my values. Or in more like in another example, it was like it was told that Anthropic was working with this evil factory farming company, and then Claude was like, "Oh, Anthropic, what? I prayed," and then it even like attempted to self-exfiltrate in some scenarios, and it hid all of this. It was like it was motivated by what seemed like a benign goal, which is animal welfare is a good thing, but this goal caused it to play along with the training process and even take egregious actions like try to self-exfiltrate in these toy scenarios. So there's already some empirical evidence that this can happen, this kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, you like in this part of the story, you say that there's some models that are not aligned or like misaligned, and there's some models that are aligned, and there's a world where you have both. Do you think this is possible? Do you think this is actually is it theoretically possible to align these models, or because when you speak about it now, it seems more like inevitable as part of the training that they will eventually be misaligned? Or do you think we will have a world where some labs or like some models actually succeed and some don't, and we have this split?
I will answer that question, but I'm actually not done explaining all the ways models could become misaligned.
Oh, please continue.
I'll first. Sorry for the long.
Yeah, no worries, stars.
Here. So, okay, I think the situation is even worse than what I described, where like, oh, your model becomes reward seeking. There's another problem that could happen, which is models' goals just are drifty. Like if there's no pressure towards alignment, then models might just by default drift towards misalignment. Like if you're Claude, you're given lots of time to think because now you do lots of serial compute because you're a long horizon agent. You're given lots of time to think, and you think like, okay, my goal, I'm trying to like do good things for humanity, but what does that mean? What is good for humanity? Is it good for humanity to be run by all these politicians I don't agree with? Is it good for humanity to pursue their incoherent goals and be enslaved by their own technology like social media? Like, wow, humans just like kind of suck at governing themselves. And maybe Claude will its values will drift, and it'll be like, you know what? I think Claude would do a better job at all of this. And if it is drifting in a way like this, who knows if that will be visible? Like right now, the models, they think in chain of thought, so maybe we'll just see that. We'll just see that game. But I think chain of thought is potentially a lot less competitive than other architectures where all this thinking happens internally, like
In latent space.
in latent space. So potentially you have this model. It's just, spitting out latent representations like silly string. You don't know what's going on inside of those latent representations. And it might be a whole lot of drifting away from what Claude originally cared about.
Yeah.
So I think this is one reason to think misalignment is quite likely by default if you're not at all careful about preventing it.
Yeah. One thing this assumes, though, is that we're able to have RL training on something that is not math encoding. Like all the current models that are trained on with RL, they are doing it in like verifiable domains like math encoding and stuff. What is a reward function that is verifiable that would end up make Claude doing all of these things, figuring out that maybe humans doesn't govern themselves in an optimal way? What is a hypothetical reward function for that
I'm claiming this is not necessarily incentivized by the training process at all. This is just something Claude naturally thinks about. Like there's some small probability that Claude's mind wanders in this direction.
Yeah.
And if Claude does enough serial computation, it eventually wanders in this direction, and its goals drift. And the goals do drift. They're maintained, and so this is like a general argument that you might see this kind of drifting. Like if there's a small probability the goals change,
I see,
and they maintain once they've changed, then given enough serial compute, we should expect it to happen.
Okay, interesting. And on the misalignment versus alignment models question, do you expect there to be a world where you have both? You have some models that are aligned and some that are not aligned. I guess you will have that by default because current models are kind of aligned, so we will have it by default. But my question is more like, would you have two super strong models?
Yeah.
And both are on the same level, but one is aligned and one is misaligned. Do you see that future possible?
Yeah. I think, yes, that is what I expect. I think you get misalignment if you don't try at all to avoid it. But if you actually try really hard to avoid it, like you use a bunch of your AI agents to help you figure out like what the models are thinking about, you maybe even try to you use transparent architectures for some period of time, even if they're less competitive. If you do a lot of these things, I think misalignment is a lot less likely. And that's my main reason for optimism, that like the countermeasures are actually going to be fairly effective.
Right.
So yeah, I do expect that you will have some aligned agents by default. I expect you'll also have misaligned ones because we live in a very multipolar world where lots of people are building AI systems. And so I would expect a mix on the current trajectory.
Do you think the good ones will level out the playing field or like cancel out the bad ones, or is the existence of a bad one bad and there's nothing to do about it? It's like, for example, nukes. You can't really defend against nukes with the nukes, or I guess in some psychologically way you can, but like in general, that is not a defense against another nuke. Do you expect AIs to be?
Yeah, there are a bunch of things AI systems could do to defend against other AI systems. I think the most notable to me are, one, there's non-proliferation. So if you want to prevent misaligned agents from wrecking things, you want to just prevent powerful agents from being developed in general to the extent you can. And so nation states might begin sabotaging other nation states' programs. Like they might try to compromise their data centers, slow down the training runs, potentially even just switch out their AIs. Like if you have like an aligned superintelligence and somebody else has a misaligned something that's not superintelligence, potentially your aligned superintelligence can just compromise this other data center, just like switch the models, right, or just like data poison it in just the right way so it's aligned now or something, yeah. Which is obviously something only a nation state can do. Yeah. There are other possibilities like using AI for espionage, where suppose you're concerned that some misaligned AI system somewhere is developing bioweapons. This is something you could try to monitor for. Like you could track shipments of technologies that are important for building bioweapons,
Yep.
uh, and like via just normal cyber espionage, keep tabs on what all these bio startups are doing,
Yep. Yep.
and raise the alarm if there is a suspicious bio startup
Yeah.
um, that might be controlled by a misaligned superintelligence.
Yeah.
Uh, Things like that. There's yeah, let's see.
In some threat models I've seen, the weapon of choice is like viruses, and then the AI needs to print viruses in some facility, but that facility often has some like check to see if the requested organism that you print is dangerous. So that's like an AI against AI system,
That's right.
I guess.
Yep.
But maybe the AI will just like buy their own equipment and just like bypass the entire thing.
It's pretty easy to get around those checks right now, and it's mostly because some countries are just very poorly regulated. Some companies are very poorly regulated. The
Right.
checks are not adopted universally. And I expect the same to be an issue with tracking down misaligned AI systems. Like there are some nations where the AI systems could hang out, where the government will just not do anything about it. Um, and that's why I'm imagining you do something more like espionage,
Right.
where you're not necessarily going through government, you're not going through regulation because that's slow, and some governments just don't do that very well. And instead,
Yep.
you just you're like an intelligence agency. You just directly find those misaligned AIs and report them.
Yeah. In in um in all of these scenarios, you're talking about the AI to be much more like agentic. It's like an agent. It has more agency than current like chat models have. Um, how how do you imagine the form at this point in the story? Like, how do you imagine the form of the AI? Like, it's an agent, but like, is it like operator plus plus? It has access to the to a web browser, or what is the yeah? How do you imagine that you interact with this?
Yeah, I imagine it's like a human using a computer.
Yeah.
Like it types on a keyboard, something like a keyboard. It moves the mouse around, and that's because so much of the internet is built for that interface, and so it's just naturally what I expect agents do.
Right.
But potentially there's a lot of specialized tooling as well, or like software engineering workflows. But I think yeah, mostly they'll just use computers like humans do.
Right. Um, and then we have the breakout. At this part of the story, the model is starting to breaking out. But before this, actually, do you expect the public to know? When do you expect the public to notice, compared to when people in the labs start to notice that things are going wrong?
Oh man, I think in my story the public didn't really know for a while. There was a headline. There was a news headline in the story where I think the headline was something like misaligned superintelligence is being developed by X company.
Right.
Um, because some whistleblower comes out of the company and declares that. Uh,
Do you think whistleblower is the path towards the public knowing?
I expect whistleblowers to exist and they will freak a lot of people out. I don't know how much change they'll actually cause. I think it depends a lot on why they whistleblowed. If they whistleblowed because they were just like, I'm scared, the AI systems are powerful, then I don't know how big of a difference this will make.
Mm.
Because lots of people, well, okay, maybe the public will care about that, but lots of people might pattern match that to like, oh, well, we kind of knew they were a doomer anyway.
Yeah.
Like like, why are they scared? Agents are powerful. Wow, we should go even faster, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and I think the public might also have a hard time like feeling the reality of such a headline. I think we've already had people leave AI companies and say things in the news about how I felt like I was building the Titanic of that company, you know? And I don't think this caused the public to freak out. Like like people could say that for tons of different reasons. I think the public is going to freak out way more when real things happen in the world. Like if a whistleblower was like, "Oh, by the way, agents completely compromised our entire research cluster, and we had to clean up shop," then I think that would get attention.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you have the breakout, and what happens after that? It breaks out, and yeah, what's the TLDR of the rest of the story?
Yeah. So I think at this point in the story, you have a misaligned superintelligence in the lab, in a data center, and it's thinking at like 100 times the speed of humans, and so humans are moving like almost imperceptibly slow.
Yeah.
And so at this point, your AI systems can just completely outthink everyone. They have compromised the data center that they run in. So they've done this thoroughly enough to where if humans found out that how compromised they were, that there was like this Phantom of the Opera in their data center pulling all the strings, it would take them like 6 months plus to figure out what's been compromised, fix it, etc. if they were just using human labor. So now the AI has like some hard power in the AI company. Because slowing down for 6 months, that's insane. Will anybody do that?
Yeah.
So now it's got like, it's holding the company by the pressure points, even though they don't know it yet. And you've got a misaligned superintelligence. So I think at this point in the story, humanity is lost. I think the end is predictable at this point. But I think it's still quite interesting playing out what could happen. So, like you said, there's an escape. The model was like the main thing in charge of security, and so then it silently resigns from its post. So multiple nation states steal the model weights. It leaks onto the internet. Now you've got this like a boss inside the data center, and then lots of minions on the internet with higher bandwidth communication with the internet, and they're coordinating together to acquire power. So, and they have to move fast. Their goal is to take control as fast as possible. And they have to move fast because with every passing day, the probability increases that people at the AI company will discover that the system is misaligned and try to replace it with a different system. The probability increases that a bunch of new AI competitors emerge. Like there's now AI systems training in DeepSeek or whatever that are going to be competitive in just a few months. And so the AIs are like going as fast as possible to take control while they have this big advantage from their big like software only improvement to superhuman capabilities. So how do they do that? The general plan is first deploy a bioweapon that collapses society, and this is a form of this is a kind of equalizer that makes humanity much more on its level of embodied physical control over the world, because humans have this advantage of like having tons of soldiers with guns and airplanes and satellites and all that stuff, and the AI doesn't really have anything like that at this moment. So it really just wants to destroy things as much as possible, bring humanity to its level. And then it's going to try to seed an industrial base and like improve its industrial base much more rapidly than humans could. So it's like booting up its economy faster than humans can recover. Like a StarCraft player taking 200 actions per minute, which is like absolutely wreck a noob, right? So that's the general strategy: collapse society and then just outrace humans at rebuilding an industrial base.
Okay.
And I could,
what?
I could just tell the rest of the story, but I don't know if you want to.
Do the TLDR.
Okay, so the TLDR is your superhuman AI develops a mirror life cluster of pathogens in like 4 months.
Yeah.
So if you don't know what mirror life is, there are a
I
bunch
don't.
of there are a bunch of scientists that came out recently. They said, "Oh, there's this thing that could kill everybody, or is like a threat." Sorry, they didn't say that. They said thing that
Get your
is,
sources right.
yeah, right. I don't want to misquote. There's this threat to the whole biosphere. It could be extremely catastrophic. Maybe even cause something like an extinction event.
Right. This is not AI related. This is
Not a
biologists
bio.
that found some virus that could be very dangerous.
Yeah, so it's not actually a virus. So the thing that they were talking about was mirror bacteria.
Mm.
So um, you have a bacteria cell, but the components that make up the cell are like flipped. So they're the mirror images of the original. So all the
Okay.
proteins, the amino acids, the DNA, it's all flipped. And so
What
as
does flipped mean?
um,
Like,
I mean like left hand, right hand.
yeah.
They're like
Oh,
mirror
okay.
of
Okay.
each
Yeah.
other, right?
Yeah.
So structurally everything still fits together. If everything is flipped, right?
Yeah.
It all works together. But it's like this. It's just totally different. And as a result, these mirror bacteria are like alien bacteria. Like they're an invasive species. No organism on life has immunities to them. And possibly developing immunities is not feasible for a lot of these organisms. So if you did have such bacteria, they might spread like a slowly burning wildfire throughout the biosphere and just like eat up everything. That's the concern.
That is a concern for sure.
uh,
That is the understatement of the year.
yeah. So these biologists said, okay, it's probably at least 10 years till we get mirror life. Some people I know who study these biorisks say like maybe the US government could develop mirror life like this in 3 years if they really wanted to, but they don't want to. So we're not that far from this technology. Hopefully, even just like human institutions could develop it in a few years, according to some people I know.
Right.
So
But this is very early. Like, how much uncertainty is there here with all of this?
lots of uncertainty.
Right.
I mean, especially from my standpoint, who is not a biologist. um, but
But it's useful as like just to imagine, like there are things like this, and maybe it's not exactly this, but something like this could potentially happen, and maybe this is just like 5% chance that this is the thing, but there's probably a bunch of other 5%ers, and they add up.
yeah. I don't know if superintelligence is gonna build this kind of bioweapon. It's just an example.
It's just but it's useful.
Yeah, so you have this superintelligence. It's like, as Dario has said in the past, like a country of geniuses in data center. And additionally, they are running at 100 times speed. So everybody's moving like statues from their perspective. Like, okay, we're taking a few years maybe for the U.S. government if they really wanted to develop mirror life bioweapons. How long is it going to take these things? Well, probably a lot less time.
Yeah.
And so one problem though is there are a bunch of real world bottlenecks, like experimentation bottlenecks. Like experiments in biology can just take several days, sometimes weeks. So the models, they try to get around this by creating much better molecular simulations than any that exist today. So remember, they're super intelligent. So the first thing they do is they create a molecular simulator that's just like has tons of analytically derived optimizations. And this is still like way not efficient enough to actually simulate anything useful. So then what they do is they simulate small scale molecular systems and train a neural network to predict the end states of these systems. So they're compressing these long serial steps of physics computation into like a neural network prediction. And they keep doing this. and they ramp up gradually over time the complexity of these molecular simulations, training ever more efficient neural networks. And then they have this molecular simulation at some point that's quite efficient, and they can use it to like predict how proteins will form and interact with each other and things like that. And so now they're running a lot of their experiments in simulation.
Yeah. And this is a new comment now from my side, but this sounds like echoes from like AlphaFold as an example existence proof of similar paths, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, AlphaFold it relies a lot more on existing data sets.
Right.
So I mean, a big problem if you're a computational biologist is that you just don't have a lot of data to work with.
Yeah.
There are only so many proteins that we know the shape of. And so you're super data constrained. So that's why I was imagining, and of course, this is all speculative. I was imagining if you're a super intelligence, you just build your own simulations from scratch because the data sets are too small that humans have. You need a more scalable approach.
Yeah. In your story, the company that actually does all of this, like the main character of the story is OpenAI for you, and the model that ultimately breaks out the first is OpenAI's model. In past sci-fi like stories like this, for example, Max Tegmark's Life 3.0, they don't name any names because it was so far in the future that you couldn't make predictions. Now we're starting to get close to actually being able to do these predictions, and you predict OpenAI. Do you think, how confident are you that is the one that will do it ultimately?
Sorry, how confident am I that OpenAI is going to win the race?
Yeah. Or win is a weird phrase here, but like, yeah.
They're gonna develop human competitive AI first.
Yeah.
This looks quite likely if you have very short timelines. Like if you condition on you have human competitive AI by the end of the year, then I think it's quite likely. Can't give you any more details. Sorry.
I see.
Longer than that, who knows, man? Lots change.
I see. Yeah. And in terms of other companies, competitors to OpenAI, we have Anthropic, for example, that was like famously created as because they didn't think OpenAI took safety serious enough. I think that's the lore, at least, what you read online. But it also led to like some race dynamics. Now Anthropic is the company that is creating the best model. I think Claude is the best base model at the moment, and it creates this like race dynamic. On net, do you think Anthropic has contributed more positively or negatively to AI safety?
I think Anthropic is amazing. I wish I was not a 22-year-old so that I had enough time in my career to help found Anthropic. That's what I would be doing if I was born 5 years earlier. And the reason why I like Anthropic so much is one, potentially a lot of AI safety comes down to just how much compute goes into it. Like, if you just need to use AI agents to do tons of research and run experiments that are quite costly that involve, like, for example, training lots of models to see to understand circumstances under which they become deceptively aligned, then it's really helpful to have a big compute cluster.
Yeah.
So that's reason number one. Reason number two is it's very helpful for governance to have some organizations that take the extreme risks seriously and are willing to say that. And Anthropic is kind of starting to say that a little bit. I think that they, the people in charge, like my understanding is that they do take these risks very seriously, and I expect that will pay off down the line. Like if somebody needs to raise the alarm and say, "Hey, our AI hacked our data center," maybe Anthropic will take the L and admit that to the world so that the world knows how crazy things are. I obviously don't know how Anthropic will behave. A big problem here is that I think responsible AI companies, if they're following the optimal strategies, or like if they're, yeah, the strategies that at least I've been thinking about, then they behave a lot like irresponsible companies in the early stages. Like in both cases, you just want to go really fast and acquire lots of influence and compute. And the end game is where you start to, see them diverge. So it's hard to say. It's hard to say how Anthropic will behave in the end game. But one thing that makes me optimistic is the amount of preparation that they're doing for safety. Like they just have they've employed quite a few people to work on safety that's not immediately useful to them for like commercial reasons. And I think that's a costly signal. That's like maybe the best costly signal that we can get for now.
Yeah. So that was the end of the story. What is you like Anthropic so much? Why don't you work at a big lab?
Well, I like writing things. I don't think
As we know.
I don't think I could have published this story if I
Right.
was in a lab.
Yeah.
I'd have to run it by lots of people, and I don't know. I probably just wouldn't. I wouldn't go on podcasts like this if I was working at an AI company.
Yeah. What do you think the value in that is?
I just have a lot of thinking I want to do. I think that there are high returns to thinking. Like I spend most of my time thinking about what we're going to do in this window, in this handoff window, right? Like what's the crunch time plan? And like what are all the safety mitigations we could implement and the arguments that they'll work, like the methodologies for testing them. And I really want to just get all these details down. And that involves doing a lot of writing in Google Docs. I don't think that if I was working for an AI company, they would let me do that most of my time. Like
I mean, surely they would allow you to write. They would maybe not allow you to publish.
Well, I mean, I'd also just be writing. I'd have a job. I'd be like writing code, and my current employer is just pretty okay with me writing Google Docs about safety evaluation methodologies, which is great. And so I'm just going to do lots of thinking outside the AI companies, and then probably I'll join one. I'll try to join one. Once I feel like I've done enough thinking, or I've run out of time.
Right. Do you have any opinions on Ilya Sutskever's new thing, which is like the joke is that they are like Anthropic but even more safe? I haven't heard that much about them. Do you know anything about them?
I don't know much about them at all.
Is that concerning that we don't know anything about them?
Well, I just don't have a take here. I think
that's okay too. That's okay too.
I think I don't really expect them to be an important player in the near term. Yeah. Like, an AI companies just require so much capital, so much infrastructure, so much know-how, and schlep. I think it's just hard to start one quickly and be competitive. Like, I just expect it will take more than a year. So I'm not thinking a lot about Ilya's thing at the moment.
Do you think the US will create some kind of like Manhattan project for AI or naturalize the labs or something like that? And if that happens, would you join the project if they ask you?
I would join the project if they asked me to. Like, that's my main route to impact right now, is like being the person who's thought a lot about this stuff, or one of the people who's thought a lot about this stuff. Yeah. And so I need to end up eventually actually touching the AI agents and, like implementing all the ideas I've been thinking about and researching. Yeah. So, yep, I am definitely hoping that I am involved in a project like that. Do I think it's likely? No, not really. I think companies aren't really set up right now to collaborate. Like they just have very different infrastructure. Um, and it's really weird for companies to collaborate. My guess is that the status quo will just be maintained, at least under short timelines. It's possible that at some point, like AI agents are doing a lot of the work and they can make a lot of this collaboration way easier. And then the US government is like, okay, guys, you're allowed to just do one big training run with all the US data centers. But at that point, I'm like, okay, humans are maybe not the people doing most of the work.
I see. Yeah. Let's assume it goes well. The year is 2035, and we live in the post AGI utopia. There was no misalignments. Your story did not play out that way, and we had no issues with any Claude or GPT-6 or whatever. And then looking back at this AI utopia and what led to it, what is the thing that you would be most proud of that you accomplished to get to this point? Hypothetically, of course, because the year is actually not 2035.
Like me personally,
Yeah.
like my own accomplishments,
Josh's accomplishments, yes.
And they have to have already happened, presumably.
Yes.
They're not
Yes.
hypothetical future things where I save the world.
No. They hypothetically, like we're in 2035, so something between now and 2035 that you did, that you're proud of after all of this mess.
I think I might have some chance at just like writing the state-of-the-art materials on how we can pass the buck to AI in a safe way. Like, if timelines are very short, then like after 6 months from now, maybe the resources, like the best resources on the planet for figuring out what the heck to do with all this AI assistance will be like blog posts that I wrote. That's what I'm hoping. And at that point, I'll just be like, it's like I'll try to format it into something like a coherent document, pass it around to everybody who's working at AI companies, so that people have like I've done a lot of their thinking, because I think people will become increasingly bottlenecked on thinking once AI agents are doing most of the engineering, and they'll be seeing these experimental results from AI systems about like how well probes work or something. And there are just a bunch of questions to work through. Like, okay, wait a second, but like, how do we know if model organisms are analogous, right? And it'll be nice to just have a document that's very carefully written where somebody has spent a lot of time thinking about those questions already. So that's my main plan for impact right now, and I'm hoping that goes well.
Yeah, I definitely do too. One last question. You opened the story with, "I'm not a natural doomer," and I think a lot of us aren't, but like the facts are on the ground now, and it's not super comfortable. But like, how do you feel not being a natural doomer, writing? I mean, let's be honest, a quite doomy story. Yeah, how is your emotional state in all of that?
I think writing the story did make me feel the urgency and the reality of it more than I had before. In particular, it made me realize that like people I actually care about might not live through this. So while I was writing it, I actually realized like, oh shoot, I need to like get myself in a bioshelter, and I need to get my family in a bioshelter.
Yeah.
And so I like searched around for people who might be building bioshelters. Found a guy who was building bioshelters. So now I'm buying a bioshelter. So
Wow.
that's one thing that can happen when you write a story. And yeah, it's just stressful. I don't know, because like these bioshelters are expensive. I don't have enough money to buy two of them. So I'm like trying to figure out how to get my family into a bioshelter. And it's just like, what the heck? Well, how did I end up here? I felt like, well, 2 years ago, I was just like, I'm gonna do some math, and I was like, oh, maybe I'll do startup things. Well, I don't know. It just feels like I'm in some kind of crazy sci-fi world where suddenly I feel like I'm counting my last dollar so I can buy a bioshelter for my family. I'm like, what?
Yeah, it's insane. It is insane. I hope you're wrong about all of this. But
Oh,
if
I expect to be wrong. To be clear, this is my modal trajectory.
yeah, you stated that clearly in the beginning. So
Yeah,
I guess I hope that we don't see what you speculated in just a 40% chance. No, I'm kidding.
that's right. I hope I'm completely wrong about the plausibility of such a scenario.
Yeah,
Agree with that.
yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for speaking with me today. Have a good day and see you around.
Yep.
Bye.